Hi, good evening. I'm Dr. Barbara Sumner, and this evening I am interviewing Sally Houghton. She is an optometrist, and she recently ran a study called Adoptee Algorithms, and it was all about why we need a peer-reviewed study of adoption outcomes because there are none, not particularly not in New Zealand where both Sally and I live and work. So the desired outcome of Sally's research was to reinforce the urgent need for state-funded, peer-reviewed clinical research in adoptee outcomes in Aotearoa, New Zealand, especially that it's been 70 years since we've had the Adoption Act and there have been no studies. So I'd like to introduce you to Sally now, and I want to ask you one thing, Sally. First of all, what first prompted you in this line of inquiry?
Well, as you say, I have been just observing in clinical practice. As you said, I'm an optometrist. I'm not a psychiatrist or a doctor, but we need to know about medical family history. A lot of eye conditions are genetic, and the patients that I observed over the whole time. They seem to, when they gave the answer that they didn't know what their family history was, and with because they were adopted, I started noticing some patterns among health patterns, adverse health patterns amongst these the people who were adopted versus people who were not. Then that sort of segued into sort of my own self-discovery as to so there were some sort of uh, patterns in my own self-abusive patterns really, which branched out more from health into a wider context. Then I started researching possible reasons or reasons behind that could explain these outcomes. And people will be familiar with Paul Sunderland, Bessel van der Kolk, Gabor Mate, and and then when I looked around to see if there had been any studies here, came up empty.
Right. One of the
So
things,
I just decided to do my own.
very good. One of the things you talk about is the consistent patterns of autoimmune disease, particularly in women, depression, addiction, and financial distress among adoptees. I find that particularly the financial distress one very interesting because I recognize and see that all the time in my work. Uh, and as you say here, once you see the patterns, you can't unsee them. One of the things that you mention is insurance companies. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yes, there seems to be with insurance companies, especially for life health insurance, there's a questionnaire that usually they're wanting to take you on. There's a questionnaire, quite a comprehensive one, and one of the questions is involving family history. And not there's not just with optometrical or ocular problems. A lot of there's a genetic sometimes thread with a lot of medical conditions. When I was applying for my own insurance, at one point, the nurse who was running through the questionnaire was quite stunned and flabbergasted when I said I wasn't aware of my family history. It's sort of like they were very skeptical. And in those questionnaires, there doesn't even seem to be, I mean, they ask about family history, but there is an example where, for example, you may not know the father's side at all. They might have left or died, or they're just out of the picture. But there's never a pinpoint question, so a follow-up or whatever. Well, why don't you know your family history, or just blatantly, are you adopted? So I'm not sure what the process is for as I said, there's no data that we have certainly here in this country. So how do they go about? I'm just sort of like thinking to myself, how do they go about? How can they factor that in?
Yeah, how do you assess?
Is there some sort of loading? Yeah. So how does that work? Because it just seems to be absent from from any actuarial information, for example. That's what I was sort of pointing to.
I think the thing that always amazes me is that you go to a new medical professional and there's always a form to fill out, whether it's whether it's a psychologist or a physiotherapist. There's always, or any kind of doctor,
Of
and
course.
and it always asks for family history, and I just put in there adopted, and so many medical professionals have said to me, "Oh, okay." So family history matters for non-adopted people, but not for adopted people. They just move on as if it
Right,
didn't happen.
right. Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that that's what the insurance industry does as well, because they don't have a way, like you say, there's no data, so they don't have a way to include that in their process. Can you tell me about your questionnaire? So, what were um, first of all, how many people participated?
237. There were 237 participants.
Wow, that's great. And you access these people just by asking people just putting up a couple of posts online and asking people if they'd like to speak to you. Is that correct?
So how it started, yes, I three main centres: Christchurch, Wellington, and Auckland, which is where I'm based, Auckland. The some I advertised just community notice boards actually, Barbara, like in the malls and also how they have community notice boards in the main centres. I also put an ad in a couple of suburban newspapers in Auckland and also the Listener. And that really was all that was required. I was actually quite chuffed about that.
What's interesting
Um,
is that you didn't do your outreach into the adopted people's community that you and I both
Correct.
know about, that we're both involved in. You did it into the general population so
That's
that you
correct. I just cast a net. Yeah.
Yeah, so you weren't pre-selecting for by going through the groups that we already are part of.
No, no,
See,
no.
that makes it even more interesting. So tell me about some of your questions. Like I was seeing one here, there's one where 61% of people said yes, they were diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and
Yeah. Yep.
71% diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, and 81% were addicted or had been addicted to illicit substances. I mean,
Mm,
these figures are really high. Were you
yeah. I,
surprised?
not overly. Um, I I actually a lot of it was based on self-discovery I'd done on myself and like reverse engineered it.
So, like
Um,
addiction to work.
I had yeah, totally.
Are you
That
addicted to
totally.
work?
I'm getting better. I'm working part
86%.
time. I'm working part time now, Barbara, not 6 days a week.
That's
But
great.
it's I'm certainly a recovering workaholic. Uh,
86% said that they had an addiction to work
mm,
in your survey.
yep,
I find that extraordinary. I certainly have it.
you have it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
always
I
feel like
think
I have to
I
prove myself.
yeah. Well, it's the not enoughness. It was
The
for
not
me.
enoughness.
It's the
Yeah,
not enoughness.
yeah. Nicely put.
Um, Yeah, and so the you're never going to be enough. It's never enough. So it's sort of like a I look on these things as a because I'll talk about some other traits in just a moment if I may, but the certainly a lot of these traits that for me anyway are they've been proxies surrogates for approval I've never received.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of these, just while I remember it, a lot of these, because I've got the sheet in front of me, a lot of these traits, um, it was like looking in a mirror.
Yeah.
It was like I was looking in a mirror for the first time.
I find your questions very interesting. So, for instance, under social patterns, you've shown that of the people that did your survey, only 33% celebrate birthdays or milestones, and you've put that down as a symbolic lack of acknowledgement. I mean, that was me. I'm still terribly uncomfortable around my birthday, and
Really? Yeah.
wasn't a celebration day. It was the day I was born, as the day my mother died. And in terms of, I mean, she didn't physically die, but she did die for me. And it's not a day of celebration. And I think many of
Mm.
us feel like that. It's really difficult to celebrate our existence.
Yeah, I was actually quite because I never really thought about it that deeply. I celebrate my certainly my birthdays, but Christmas was a really interesting one for me. A
Mm.
lot of people actually, as adults, they seem to unsubscribe, as I'd put it, from the family gatherings. And that's how I would put it.
Yeah.
And thinking about it, Christmases, when I think about it, were actually always for a long time were quite profoundly sad for me. My brother, who was also an adoptee, he had a lot of these traits that have the high percentages, and he most certainly died far too young because of it. And certainly since he passed, Christmases were always profoundly sad. It was sort of like I felt like I was shoehorned into shoehorned into a setting which was not celebratory at all.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So yeah, the Christmas one and the family gatherings too, because it's all about you sort of feel like you're having to play a part that's not actually really you.
Well, you are, and you're also I'm always aware that I have this whole thing around being under observation. And it was like the adopters and their broader family members were always looking to see how I didn't fit. Not how I did fit, but how I
Mm,
didn't. And they found,
yeah, like a
they
surveillance.
found
Yeah,
multiple ways that I didn't fit in their family. And, if you said anything, certainly if I said anything, that caused a huge fuss, that it was the sign of, not being grateful and all the usual things that adopted people understand. So I found all celebrations really difficult, and I still have anxiety around them. And I have anxiety around events with my own family because there's always this fear of being rejected. And so you have to make sure that you are as good as you can be so that that won't happen. But there's nothing you can do
exactly.
about
Yeah,
that. It's
yeah.
a, it's not a good thing. You've talked about, you had a section on attachment and relationships, and this incredible figure of 94% are in who answered your survey are in codependent romantic relationships. What do you make from that?
I wasn't surprised, and my own experience has played that out. The There is a psychiatrist, John Bolboys or something. The I'm butchering his name. Sorry, Barbara. But the who talks about he had attachment theory, and the all adoptees, all certainly all of the participants in this survey have insecure. They have insecure attachment because it's all comes back to the severance, the bond that didn't form between our families of origin and the child and the family of origin. And so you take that into your relationship,
Yeah, you
into
do.
future relationships. So, which are often quite toxic. And certainly if it's not, no, this is no blame, shame or anything, but certainly not if you're with a non-adoptee, then it can even, the dynamic can be even more
It's not easy.
dysfunctional.
I mean, you see
Um,
here, your survey shows 87% of adopted people have experienced domestic violence. I take that
yes,
to also mean in my adopted home because I most certainly did.
yes,
And then later on, my relationships were not necessarily were not physically violent, but there was a what would be the way to describe it? Because I was treated so um, as if I was of no importance in the family dynamic, I expected to be treated like that outside of that once I got out into the world. And so I repeated that pattern in two major relationships. And it took me into my 40s before I was able to start breaking that pattern and choosing someone who did respect me and didn't, treat me as my basically my adoptive father had treated me, which was very poorly.
yeah, yeah. It's because you think that that's what it looks like, isn't it?
Yeah.
There was quite an interesting, and it's, unless there's some self-awareness, the pattern just keeps repeating. You're a basic, you're sort of taught, we're taught, sorry, that we're not worth anything.
Wow, it's the message of being that idea, isn't it? Where if you love your child, you will give them away. I'm using give in, inverted
Yeah, yeah,
commas. And so for us, love is abandonment. And we need to keep repeating that so that we can get that sense of, I don't know, we're trying to connect always with the first experience.
that's right.
And it is so dysfunctional.
Another interesting one, Barbara, actually is well, for me was how quite a few participants actually started off, and this I'm included in this. Not that I wasn't included I didn't include myself in this by the way. But they started off quite extroverted. Now, extroverted means that you can get your energy from other people. But then as the years went by, and this has happened to me too, they've become very introverted.
Yeah.
And I think because I find people, present company not, um, I find people they can be quite exhausting.
Mm. Oh, yeah.
And it's actually because we've had to contort ourselves to be a certain way, to be acceptable. And that just wears you down after a while. So I needed a lot of time on my own now
Yeah.
to
Solitude.
recharge, because otherwise you're just worn to a nub.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you say here,
So I found that
89.
quite interesting. A lot of people now, later in life, are actually introverted, whereas they started extroverted. I found that really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you say 89% of your respondents were introverted and needed solitude for well-being. I think
They do
some of
now.
that's certainly me. One of the things is that we're so now I was hyper vigilant. I still am. And so whenever you're in a group, it's like this radar gets activated and I am
That's right.
always, friend or foe. Like me, don't like me, have I said too much? Is my voice too loud? Is it, I'm constantly checking myself that I'm not offending anyone in the room.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Part of me quite likes
Interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
being offensive
One of the
sometimes.
things, yeah. One of the things that that was actually very cathartic for me, I was talking about another statistic, was the hoarding. So the propensity for hoarding,
Yeah, it's all
and
of that.
the percentage was 81%.
Yes.
And when I because am a recovering hoarder, but that was particularly cathartic for me And I don't know if you have you heard of chaos, the acronym chaos,
No, tell me.
CHAOS. It's can't have anyone over syndrome.
Ah,
It's because it's too embarrassing if you've got the a place which is was not necessarily packed to the rafters, but it's certainly very cluttered. And for me, that whole surrounding myself with objects, like a security blanket. And so if you can't have people over to your house, not that I'm interested, but you know what I mean. It's still very isolating, isn't it? And then you've got shame. Then you've got shame piled on more shame, and then more
yeah.
shame. But it would be very isolating for someone, for the majority of people, I would have thought. But so the hoarding one really struck to the heart of for me.
It would be great to be able to do as you say, a peer-reviewed study where we had adopted and non-adopted, where the study was controlled for various aspects, age, income, those kinds of things, just to see how different they are in those ways. I mean, you call this a collector mentality, holding on literally and metaphorically. And I mean, I know I do that to some extent, but what I understand is that I have no heirlooms. My adopter gave me nothing of her things because I was, in her words, you don't agree with adoption, so obviously you don't want anything from us. And I said, but that's
Interesting.
my entire childhood. It's the only one I had. But no. And so I do collect things that feel heirloom like,
Yeah, right. Yeah,
that
yeah.
that I might have had if I'd had that, if I'd been in my own family.
Mm,
And other people,
yeah.
I watch those, I used to, it's a bit triggering, the antique roadshow. And
Oh, yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
very interesting when they write about in some analysis of the show about how people in the end don't care what the price is. If they bring in something that's a beautiful family heirloom and it's worth nothing, they go away happy because it's still their heirloom. It's something that connects them. And
Mm,
and it connects them. It's not just the thing that their grandparent or great grandparent owned. It's a it's a genetic line. It's like a it's a way of connecting with the past. And
mm.
I know some adopted people are fine with their adopters and having that relationship, but I didn't. I wanted some things from my childhood, but I didn't want their parents and their grandparents and great grandparents' things because they weren't mine. They meant
Right. Yeah.
they meant nothing to me. I wanted photographs of my own family, my own grand,
Right. Yes. Yeah.
not
Yeah.
theirs, because they're not mine.
Yeah. Again, it seems like it's a proxy for the I'm talking about the need because I'm terrible with like books and things like that, but I've got collections of all sorts of things, and it's sort of again it's like a proxy,
Yeah, it
for
is.
you sort of, for some sort of secure, you feel a lot secure with your things.
Yeah,
But it just very, very quickly, just on that, I did a bit of a road trip just recently. My mother's who lived to nearly 103, by the way. She had some rings, just a couple of rings, and I wanted to keep them in the no use passing them on, through my lineage. So they had to be, I just, in my heart, they needed to be returned to, and kept in that family. I think, she never expressed any wish like this, but it was actually I felt like I was on a bit of a pilgrimage and handed the rings over to the female, some of the two female, I chose them because they just felt like the right ones, handed them back, and then they stay in the family, and that it keeps on down. I felt no connection anyway, which
mm,
might sound a bit heartless, and then I gave my father's family crest. He was from England. I sent that back to his his family of
These are
origin.
your
But it had
adopted.
no meaning to me.
Yeah, so
Yes,
these are your the things that belong to your
yes,
adopted.
that's correct. Yeah,
Isn't
yeah,
that interesting? Because, you'd think that they would have something, but I know they don't. They have nothing.
that's
That
right.
we,
Yeah,
the thing that's so fascinating to me is that you're adopted as a non-consenting infant, and then you grow up and you have to remain an adopted person all your life. You don't get
that
the
status.
chance to become unadopted. You never get to age out. And so you are always an adopted child, no matter how old you are. And I find
Yeah,
that very disturbing that we are not recognized at all. And
yes, I agree. I agree.
you have said in your uh, you've asked a question here about, well, I'd like to ask you a question here about how do you see adoptee trauma paralleling other unacknowledged traumas? What do you mean by that?
One of with the patient base that I've had quite a bit of interaction with is war veterans. And probably more specific, there was specifically Vietnam War veterans. We're involved in part of their medical assessment.
Right.
And on one of I came across a thing recently. I was throwing things out because we were keep records for a certain length of time, then you've got to destroy them. And it was actually a comment on and it was to do with a Vietnam War veteran. And they were saying that so the state was covering some of the costs for their medical assessments. And there was a comment on there which said that the unacknowledged trauma, the unacknowledged trauma, this is by the state and also fellow citizens, this is an Aotearoa, blocks healing.
How interesting, because we
And
know
that's
that,
what I mean, because
yeah,
it's actually the lack of recognition, like and there's
particularly
a lot of
Vietnam.
shame.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
Vietnam vets got no recognition for the work that they did and how, their bravery and heroics. So,
and
and
they
they
were in
came
very
back
toxic environments too.
and they were vilified.
Mm.
And I think that's a tragedy. And so, how interesting that you would say that having an unacknowledged trauma does block healing. And I
That's
get
what it
that.
says on their form. That's what it said on their form.
I'd like to
On
see
the
that
medical
talk.
form.
I'd really
Yeah,
like to
the
see that
notes.
actually, because
Yeah,
I find that to be the case for all of us. I mean, we've had the minister, Nicole McKee, the other day talking about how intercountry adopted people come to New Zealand and are transferred onto the 55 Act and with all the protections that the New Zealand Act offers. And I'm thinking protections. Well, you only want to protect somebody if they're in a welfare situation. And adoption is not welfare. We have other legislation for welfare. It's
absolutely.
it's it's a state-sanctioned property transaction. Each of us is. And so this idea of being endless children that need protection is, I mean, I'm a pensioner. It's time for it to end. It really
Yeah,
is.
yeah. No, it's that seems to be it's a slight they're sleights of hand, aren't they? They're
Yeah.
sleights of hand. This
Yeah.
is why how a magic trick works. So you're sort of like, well, look over there, and then we don't need to worry about looking over there.
Yeah, exactly.
But the other thing is that absolutely it's more a property transaction, and then also then we end up being party to an employment contract with a with an impossible job description.
Yeah.
But
It is
certainly it's
for
yeah,
life. We are
yeah,
employed from birth to perform the role of the child they couldn't or wouldn't have. So it is a job. You never stop working
yeah,
in
yeah,
that role.
yeah,
So yeah, I get
yeah,
it.
yeah,
We are
yeah.
almost out of time. Um, I guess really the point in the end is that the importance of validation and
Yes.
that one, as you say, once seen and heard, healing begins. And that is really, that's the work I'm doing, and it's the work you're doing. That to acknowledge that adoption is trauma, that maternal separation damages us, damages our brains, damages the way we interact with the world. And healing is very elusive because of the lack of validation. And we've had this now for 70 years, and there apparently isn't going to be any change anytime soon.
The what I'm after is the essentially of course a peer reviewed
Yeah,
like a longitudinal
yeah,
research,
yeah, me
because we
too.
need a, without the data, because the other thing is that the I think that emotion isn't going to get it over the line.
Yeah.
But and
Has
numbers
to
have always done it. Numbers have done it. Yeah, numbers have always done it for me, Barbara. Anyway, so that's without the data, the policy, the support systems, they're just going to remain, completely blind.
There is no,
Um,
we
so
have no data at all, not in, or statistics, in any single government department. None. I've been to every one as part of my PhD.
yeah,
Not a single one collects any data on adoption outcomes or adopted people. They don't control for adoption, whether it's the coroner, whether it's corrections. Uh, um, there is nowhere that controls for adoption. And that's because the 1955 Act says we are as if born to our adopters. So the law sees us as no different. And yet we are profoundly different. Our experience
mm,
of life is profoundly different.
yes, yeah, absolutely. So the bigger for me, the and the only way that I think we can have yeah, to sort of get something moving is to gain some sort of critical mass.
I agree. If you've got a special formula for how to do that, do let me know.
No, yeah, not off the top of my head, no, no. I just need to say something. I find this really something this is sad and sweet at the same time. It's just the little thing. I had some participants contact me to make sure that they were going to fill out the questionnaire properly. How's that?
They were worried about getting it wrong.
Exactly. How sad and sweet is that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know that feeling. It's a
You
very
know,
easy one. And of course, the moment you,
that says it all, really, doesn't it?
yeah, because getting it
Yeah.
wrong is actually how we feel about ourselves. We feel we're wrong. We've grown up in the wrong place with the wrong people, with the wrong community, everything.
Yeah, yeah. So
Sally?
that's one of the things I'd want to say. The it's very empowering. It's been very empowering, hopefully, for with the participants. And there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you, and you're not a bad person. But every statistic is a life lived. That's what I say, and we all deserve to be counted. So,
We
and
do.
yes, if I do come up with a magic formula, you'll be the first to know, Barbara.
Thank you. Sally, thank you so much. I mean, I find that your survey was profound and fascinating. First one in New Zealand, taken with adults. And I'm hoping that together we can take it further and see where we can go with it.
Yeah. Here, here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thanks, Sally.
Okay.
Very nice
All the
talking to
best.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye.